In the hallowed, crystal-adorned ballrooms of Seattle, a wedding is more than a union. It is a meticulously choreographed display of status and legacy. For 20 years, I lived in the quiet, hard-working shadows of this city, scrubbing floors and balancing 2 jobs to ensure my daughter, Mariah, never felt the cold sting of the poverty that tried to claim us. I raised her with a singular, ironclad belief that dignity isn't found in a bank account, but in the strength of one's spine. When she met Ethan Whitmore, I saw a young man who loved her with a purity that transcended his family's immense fortune. I wore my simple, off-the-rack dress to their wedding with the pride of a mother who had crossed a desert to see her child reach an oasis. I thought I was finally witnessing the reward for 2 decades of silent sacrifice. But as the 400 elite guests raised their glasses under the shimmering fairy lights, the air didn't turn sweet, it turned lethal. That I will never forget the vibration of the floor as Mr. Whitmore, Ethan's father, stepped to the microphone with the practiced grace of a predator. He didn't offer a father's blessing, he launched a public execution of our character. "Let us all clap for the woman who raised a child alone, but could not raise herself," he sneered, his voice echoing off the marble walls like a gavel. "She may be wearing a nice dress today, but we all know what she really is." The nervous laughter of the elite felt like glass shards against my skin. He looked at my calloused hands and saw a servant who had wandered into a palace. He thought he was putting a nobody in her place, unaware that his polished, $60 million exterior was a shroud for a past he had spent 30 years trying to incinerate. When I stood up and asked, "Do you even know who I am?" the color vanished from his face so fast it was as if a ghost had reached out and touched his heart. He wasn't afraid of my anger, he was terrified of my memory. There is a visceral, protective fire that ignites in a mother's soul when a bully mistakes her endurance for submission. Mr. Whitmore believed he held all the cards, but he was holding a house of cards built on a foundation of industrial sabotage and identity theft. This wasn't just a rich man being cruel. It was a desperate act of war to protect a massive trust fund and a secret that dated back to a high-end hotel room 30 years ago. My daughter had married into a dynasty that viewed her as a glitch in their machinery, a threat to a grandfather's legacy that rewarded honesty over corporate greed. I didn't know yet that the ballroom was crawling with hidden brothers, forged legal documents, and a security team tasked with kidnapping the bride. But as the music died and the Seattle police began to swarm the entrance, I realized that the woman who couldn't raise herself was the only one standing between my daughter and a life of orchestrated ruin. This is the story of a mother who refused to stay silent, a father-in-law whose lies were finally caught in the light, and the devastating price of a name. The microphone was still in my hand when my daughter's father-in-law leaned close to it, smiled at the crowd, and said, "Let us all clap for the woman who raised a child alone, but could not raise herself. She may be wearing a nice dress today, but we all know what she really is." 400 guests laughed nervously. Some gasped and some looked down at their plates. And my daughter Mariah froze beside the wedding cake like her heart had stopped. My fingers went cold, my ears rang, and I could feel old pain rushing back like a storm. But then I stood up, looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Do you even know who I am?" His smile vanished instantly. His face went pale and he took one step back like he had seen a ghost. And in that moment, one terrifying thought hit me. What secret does this man think he can bury? And what will he do to my daughter if I expose it right here? The ballroom was bright with fairy lights, white flowers, and soft music. The kind of music that makes people feel safe. My daughter's dress shimmered like snow, and her hands were shaking inside mine. Her husband, Ethan, stood on the other side of her, trying to smile, but I saw his jaw tighten when his father spoke. Ethan's father was Mr. Whitmore, rich and loud, with a voice that filled every room like a trumpet. But the truth is, this moment did not begin at the wedding. It began years ago when Mariah was just a little girl with 2 braids and scraped knees, and our house was small, and the roof leaked when it rained. I raised my daughter alone, and I do not say that to sound heroic. I say it because it is the main reason I learned to listen to my instincts. When Mariah was 5, her father left. He did not slam the door and yell. He did not even fight. He just stopped coming home. At first, he made excuses. Then he stopped calling. Then one day, I realized he was gone for good. That was when life became very simple and very hard. I worked 2 jobs. In the morning, I cleaned offices. In the evening, I cooked at a small diner. Mariah would sit at the counter at the diner sometimes, coloring in a worn book while I poured coffee and smiled at customers. When I came home, I helped her with homework, even when my eyes wanted to close. Some nights after she fell asleep, would sit at the edge of her bed and whisper, "I will not let the world break you. I promise." Years passed. Mariah grew into a kind, brave young woman. She was the type of girl who helped little kids tie their shoes, who returned lost wallets, who hugged people when they were sad. She was also smart, very smart. She got scholarships. She studied hard. She dreamed big. Then she met Ethan. She met him in college in the library when her books fell off the table and rolled across the floor. Ethan helped her pick them up and made a joke about the books trying to escape. Mariah laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made me feel warm just hearing about it later. When Mariah brought Ethan home for the first time, I watched him closely because a mother who raised a child alone does not stop being careful. Ethan was polite. He called me ma'am. He asked if I needed help carrying groceries. He looked at Mariah like she was the best thing in the room. That made my heart relax a little. But then he said, "My father would love to meet you." The way Ethan said it was strange. It was like he was proud and nervous at the same time. That a week later, we went to dinner at Ethan's family home. Their house was huge with shiny floors and tall windows. Everything smelled like expensive candles. A maid opened the door, and I remember feeling like my shoes were too simple for that hallway. Mr. Whitmore greeted us with a big smile, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at my hands first, like he wanted to see if I wore rings, and then he looked at my face like he was searching for something he could use. He said, "So, you're the mother?" I smiled and said, "Yes, I'm Mariah's mom." He nodded slowly. "And her father?" I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the kind that comes when someone pokes an old bruise, but I kept my voice calm. "It's been just the two of us for a long time." His smile tightened. How modern. Then, during dinner, he asked Mariah questions that felt like traps. "What does your mother do for work?" he asked. Mariah answered, "She works hard. She's always worked hard." He chuckled. "Hard work is nice, but it does not replace a proper family name." I stared at him and I remember thinking, this man is not asking questions because he cares. He is measuring us like we are items at a store. After dinner, when we were in the car, Mariah whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know he would talk like that." I squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Some people think money makes them better. It doesn't." But from that day on, Mr. Whitmore acted like he did not want Mariah in his family. He was not rude to her face all the time. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he was polite in public and cruel in little ways. He would forget to invite her to family events. He would send gifts that felt like jokes, like a book titled How to Fit In at Fancy Parties. He would make comments like, "We Whitmores have standards," and then glance at Mariah's shoes. Ethan tried to defend her, but you could tell he had been trained his whole life to fear his father's anger. Sometimes Ethan would say, "Dad, stop," and Mr. Whitmore would just look at him and say, "Do you want to be cut off?" Then Ethan would go quiet like a candle being blown out. One day, Mariah came to my apartment with red eyes. "He said I'm not good enough," she whispered. "He said I'm lucky Ethan even noticed me." I pulled her into my arms. "Listen to me. You are not lucky to be loved. Love should not be a prize you beg for. You are worthy and you have always been worthy." She nodded, but I could see something new in her face, fear. Then the engagement happened. Ethan proposed in a little park at sunset. Mariah cried happy tears and called me right away. I was so proud of her, I could barely speak, but 2 days later, Mr. Whitmore invited me to lunch. It sounded harmless, but I have learned that when someone like him invites you somewhere alone, it is usually because they think they can control the story. We met at a fancy restaurant where the napkins were folded like art. Mr. Whitmore did not waste time. He leaned forward and said, "Your daughter is sweet, but she is not the right match for my son." I took a slow breath. They love each other. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Love is for children. This is about legacy. My son is meant to marry into strength. Then he slid a small envelope across the table. I did not touch it. He said, "This is a generous amount. Take it and convince your daughter to end this engagement." Quietly. My whole body went hot. He was trying to buy my daughter's future like she was a thing. I looked at him and said, "Keep your money. My daughter is not for sale." His eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake." I leaned closer. "No, you are, because I raised Mariah to know her value and I raised myself to know mine." For a second, his face changed. His confident mask slipped. He stared at me like he recognized something he did not want to see. Then he recovered and said softly, "You really don't remember me, do you?" My heart skipped. "Remember you?" I repeated. He smiled again, but this time it looked nervous. "Never mind. Enjoy the wedding." When I told Mariah about the lunch, she cried and shook with anger. "Mom, why is he like this?" she asked. I told her the truth, because he is afraid of losing control. But I still did not understand why he said, "You really don't remember me." That line stuck to my mind like a thorn. As the wedding got closer, strange things started happening. The florist called and said the payment did not go through even though Mariah had already paid. The venue called and said someone tried to change the date. The cake shop said a man called pretending to be Ethan and tried to cancel the order. Each time when we checked, the calls came from private numbers. No name, no proof. But my instincts screamed one thing: someone was trying to sabotage the wedding. Mariah kept saying, "It has to be his father." Ethan kept saying no, he wouldn't go that far. But Ethan's eyes looked tired, like he was lying to himself. The night before the wedding, Mariah came to my hotel room and sat on the bed in her pajamas. "I'm scared," she admitted. I brushed her hair back like I used to when she was little. "Of what, baby?" She swallowed. "What if he ruins everything tomorrow? What if he humiliates us? What if Ethan chooses him?" My chest tightened because I knew that fear was real. I took her hands. "Tomorrow you hold your head up. You walk in like you belong there because you do. If anyone tries to shame you, they are the one who should be ashamed." Mariah nodded, but her eyes were still wet. Then on the wedding day, everything looked perfect at first. The ceremony was beautiful. Mariah and Ethan said their vows. People cried. People smiled. For a moment, it felt like love had won. Then we moved into the reception. That was when Mr. Whitmore took the microphone. He tapped it twice like he owned the room and said, "Before we eat, I'd like to say a few words." Ethan stiffened. Mariah glanced at me. I could see her trying to be brave. Mr. Whitmore smiled at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming. Today, our family becomes larger." Some people laughed politely. Then his voice sharpened. "And I must say it's inspiring. Mariah's mother raised her alone. It's a miracle she turned out presentable." My stomach dropped. He continued louder now, making sure everyone could hear. "But raising a child alone often means teaching them the wrong lessons, like chasing comfort instead of honor, and taking shortcuts instead of earning respect." A hush spread across the ballroom. Mariah's face went white. Ethan turned toward his father like he was about to speak, but Mr. Whitmore lifted a hand to silence him. Then Mr. Whitmore said the cruel line, the one that made the room spin: "Let us all clap for the woman who raised a child alone but could not raise herself. She may be wearing a nice dress today, but we all know what she really is." My daughter's eyes filled with tears. And I realized something. This was not just a rich man being mean. This was personal. He hated me, not just Mariah. And he was trying to destroy us in one single moment in front of everyone. That was when I stood up, took a breath that felt like fire and said into the microphone, "Do you even know who I am?" His smile vanished instantly. His face went pale and his eyes for the first time looked afraid. I watched him carefully and I understood something even more terrifying. Mr. Whitmore was not scared of me getting angry. He was scared of what I might say next. And as the whole room stared at us, silent and shocked, Mr. Whitmore leaned down and whispered so only I could hear, "If you say my name the way you used to, I will ruin your daughter's life." My heart slammed against my ribs. Because in that second, I realized I did know him. Not as Mr. Whitmore, but as someone from my past, someone I had tried to forget. And the question that shook me was this: what did he do back then? And what secret is he so desperate to keep hidden now? The music kept playing, but it sounded far away like it was coming from another building because all I could hear was Mr. Whitmore's whisper in my ear, "If you say my name the way you used to, I will ruin your daughter's life." My hands were shaking and the microphone felt heavy like a stone. And I could feel 400 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting to see if I would cry or shout or sit back down and stay quiet like he expected. I did not sit. I did not cry. I looked at my daughter, Mariah, and her eyes were wide and wet, and I could see her trying to breathe, trying not to fall apart in front of everyone. Ethan stood beside her, stiff as a board, his face pale, too, but his eyes kept darting between me and his father like he was trapped between two cliffs. That I turned back to Mr. Whitmore and said calmly, "You should not threaten people at weddings." His lips twitched trying to find his smile again, but it would not come back. The room was so quiet that the clinking of a spoon on a plate sounded loud. Then, like a man trying to cover a mistake, Mr. Whitmore chuckled and spoke into the microphone again. Anyway, let's not take jokes too seriously. It's a happy day." A few people forced a laugh, but it did not feel real. It felt like fear wearing a mask that I knew I had to be smart. If he truly had power, and if he truly wanted to harm Mariah's future, then I could not explode in front of everyone without knowing what he meant. I had to protect her first and fight second. So, I lifted my chin, smiled gently at the crowd, and said into the microphone, "Thank you, everyone. Let's celebrate the couple. They deserve joy, not ugly words." I handed the microphone to the wedding planner and walked straight to Mariah. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "Look at me, baby. You are safe. Keep smiling for now. We will handle this." She nodded, but her tears slipped anyway. I wiped them quickly like it was just happy tears. For her sake, I pretended. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know he would do that." I looked him in the eyes. "Then you need to start knowing what your father is capable of." Ethan flinched like my words slapped him. Mr. Whitmore watched us from across the room, holding a glass, acting calm, but I noticed his fingers tapping the side of the glass again and again. He was nervous, and that told me something important. He was not in control the way he wanted everyone to believe. That a little later, I found a quiet corner near the hallway that led to the restrooms. The lights were dim there, and the laughter from the dance floor sounded muffled. Ethan followed me, his shoulders tight. He said, "My dad has always been harsh, but he's not a criminal. He just says stupid things." I turned to Ethan slowly. "He offered me money to make Mariah leave you." Ethan's mouth fell open. "He did what?" "He slid an envelope across a restaurant table like he was buying a sofa," I said. "And today he tried to shame her in front of everyone." "Ethan, that is not just harsh. That is cruel and planned." Ethan looked sick. "I didn't know. I swear." I believed Ethan did not know everything. But I also knew that not knowing does not stop harm. I took a deep breath. "Your father said something else today. He said, if I say his name the way I used to, he would ruin Mariah's life." Ethan blinked fast. "What does that even mean?" "It means I knew him before," I said softly. "And he does not want that known." Ethan stared at me like I had suddenly turned into a stranger. That I did not want to tell this story in the middle of my daughter's wedding, but I could not protect her without pulling the truth out of the dark. So, I spoke in a low voice, slow and clear. When I was young, I said, before Mariah was even born, I worked in a different city. I was a young woman trying to survive. I got a job at a fancy hotel. I cleaned rooms. I carried towels. I smiled even when people treated me like I was invisible. Ethan swallowed. One day, I continued, a man came to that hotel. He was not rich like he is now, but he acted like he owned every hallway. He liked to make workers feel small. He liked to flirt then laugh when girls got uncomfortable. His name was not Whitmore then. He used a different name like he was hiding. Ethan whispered, my dad changed his name years ago. He told me it was for business. I nodded once. It was for hiding, too. My heart hurt as old memories rose, but I kept my voice steady. That man tried to get me fired because I refused to let him treat me badly. He told the manager lies, said I stole something. I almost lost my job. Ethan's eyes widened. He did that to you? Yes, I said, but I fought back. I found proof he was lying. The manager apologized. The man hated me for it. He told me, you'll regret embarrassing me. Ethan looked like he couldn't breathe. That's my father. I did not say the old name yet because I could still hear Mr. Whitmore's threat like a snake in my ear. But Ethan was shaking now and he said, why would he care now? That was years ago. I stared toward the dance floor where Mariah was sitting with her bridesmaids, trying to smile, trying to pretend her heart was not breaking, because people like him don't forget when someone stands up to them, and because he doesn't want anyone to know who he used to be. Ethan's voice cracked. But he has money, he has lawyers, he has connections. What can he even do to Mariah? I leaned closer and said, he can lie. He can pressure people. He can try to control your job, your apartment, your future. He can make life hard, but he cannot do that if we expose him first. Ethan looked torn, like he wanted to protect Mariah, but also feared his father. Then Ethan whispered something that made my stomach drop. My father told me something last month, he said. He said, if I marry Mariah, he will cut me off from the family company. He said he will make sure I never get another job in this city. I clenched my jaw. And you still married her? Ethan nodded, shame in his eyes. Because I love her, but I didn't tell her the full truth. I didn't want to scare her. I felt anger, but not at Ethan's love. I felt anger at his silence. Silence does not protect people, I told him. It just protects the bully. Ethan looked down and I could tell he finally understood. Just then, my phone buzzed in my purse. One message, unknown number. My fingers turned cold as I opened it. It was a photo. A photo of Mariah's face taken from the side right here at the wedding, like someone had been watching her closely. Under the photo were simple words, keep quiet or she pays. My breath caught in my throat. Ethan saw my face and whispered, what is it? I turned the screen toward him. His eyes widened and he whispered, that's from my father's security team number range. He uses private lines, but the codes look like his. A wave of fear rolled through me, but under that fear was something stronger. A promise. Nobody threatens my child and walks away smiling. I looked up and scanned the room. People were dancing, laughing again, trying to pretend nothing happened. Mr. Whitmore stood near the bar with two men in dark suits, watching, always watching. Then I saw something else. One of the suited men slipped a small envelope into the wedding planner's hand. The planner's eyes went wide, and she nodded fast like she had been ordered that my chest tightened. I stepped closer, staying behind a row of tall flower stands so I could see without being seen. The wedding planner hurried toward the main table where the gifts were placed. She reached under the gift table cloth like she was looking for something hidden. Ethan whispered, what is she doing? I don't know, I said, but it's not normal. The planner pulled out a small black box I had never seen before and tucked it into her bag. Then she rushed toward the hallway that led to the kitchen and staff rooms that I grabbed Ethan's sleeve. Follow her quietly. Ethan hesitated. My dad. I cut him off. If you don't choose your wife now, you will lose her forever. That made him move. We slipped through the hallway, past the restrooms toward the staff door. The music faded behind us, and the air smelled like dish soap and warm bread. We stopped near the kitchen entrance. The wedding planner was speaking to someone, her voice shaky. I did what you said, she whispered. I took the box. Please, just don't cause a scene. A deep voice answered from the shadows, calm and cold. There will be a scene, the voice said, unless the mother learns her place. Ethan's face drained of color. Because that voice did not belong to Mr. Whitmore. It belonged to someone else, someone who sounded younger, sharper, someone who had been hiding. And then the person stepped forward into the light, and Ethan whispered one word that made my blood run cold, brother. And before I could even ask what he meant, the man looked straight at me, smiled like he enjoyed fear, and said, hello again. I've been waiting for you to remember. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded paper, and waved it slowly. On the top of the paper, in bold letters, were the words marriage annulment request. My heart dropped because I understood what he was trying to do. He was trying to destroy Mariah's marriage on the same night it began. And the worst part was Ethan looked like he had just seen a ghost from his own life, which meant this secret was bigger than I even guessed. And I could only think one thing as the man stepped closer: who is Ethan's brother? And what exactly did the Whitmore family plan to do to my daughter tonight? Ethan's whisper, brother, made the hallway feel colder, even though the kitchen behind us was warm. The man in the shadows stepped forward and the light caught his face. He looked like Ethan. Same jawline, same eyes, but his smile was different. Ethan's smile was gentle. This man's smile was sharp, like he enjoyed hurting people. My name is Lucas, he said, holding the folded paper up like it was a prize. And yes, Ethan, I am your brother. Your father just didn't think you deserved to know. Ethan's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked like his brain was trying to catch up. I forced myself to stay steady because Mariah was out there smiling through pain and she had no idea a storm was building behind the kitchen doors. I said, why are you here, Lucas? Lucas turned to me slowly like he was pleased I spoke first. I'm here because you embarrassed my father years ago and he never forgot. I'm also here because your daughter is about to take something that was never meant for her. Ethan found his voice. What are you talking about? Dad said you were. He said he had no other kids. Lucas laughed softly. Of course he did. He changes names, changes stories, changes whatever he needs to stay clean. Then Lucas tapped the paper. This is an annulment request. It's going to be filed first thing in the morning. And once it's filed, everyone will say the wedding was a mistake, a rushed mess, a little drama that got corrected. Ethan took a step forward. You can't do that. We just got married. Lucas lifted his eyebrows. People can do anything when they have money, lawyers, and a plan. Especially when they have leverage. I felt my stomach tighten. Leverage like what? Lucas's eyes flicked to the black box in the wedding planner's bag. Leverage like that. The wedding planner, a young woman with shaky hands, stood frozen like she wished she could disappear. Tears were sitting in her eyes. She looked terrified. I said gently, are you being forced? She nodded fast. He said he would ruin my business. He said he would make sure I never work again. He said he has proof of mistakes I made years ago, paperwork, problems, taxes, things I fixed, but he said he can make it look like a crime. Lucas smiled like he enjoyed her fear. People make choices when they're scared. Ethan's hands curled into fists. What is in the box? Lucas stepped closer to Ethan, just close enough to feel like a threat. A recording, he said. A very useful recording from earlier tonight. A recording that can be edited to make it look like Mariah threatened my father or tried to steal or did something wild. Something that will embarrass her and make everyone doubt her. My chest went hot. That is disgusting. Lucas tilted his head. It's business. Then he looked straight at me and his eyes narrowed like he was trying to pull a memory out of my face. And you, he said, you're the real problem. Ethan snapped, stop talking to her like that. Lucas's smile widened. Ethan. You still don't understand your father. He doesn't hate your wife because she's poor. He hates her because she's honest. Ethan blinked. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, Lucas said. Honest people don't play along. Honest people ask questions. Honest people notice lies. My mind raced. This wasn't only about class. This was about control and fear. Then Lucas said the thing that made my heart drop even lower. You want to know why we can't let Mariah stay in this family? He asked. Because she's about to inherit something. Ethan's face changed. Inherit what? My father's money? That's not even. Lucas held up a finger. Not your father's money. Your grandfather's. Ethan went still. My grandfather's estate was divided years ago. Lucas shook his head slowly. That's what you were told. I felt a strange chill because suddenly my instincts started lining pieces up like puzzle parts. Ethan's father had acted like Mariah was a threat from the start, even before he really knew her. Why? Because she was close to Ethan. If Ethan inherited something large, Mariah would be connected to it. Lucas leaned in and said, your grandfather left a trust, a real trust, not the one your father told you about. A trust that kicks in only if you are married to a spouse who is not tied to the Whitmore family business. Ethan stared. Why would he do that? Lucas shrugged. Maybe your grandfather knew your father was greedy. Maybe he knew your father would try to control your life. Maybe he wanted to protect you from becoming his puppet. Ethan's voice was quiet. How do you know this? Lucas smiled again. Because I was the one who found the documents and because your father promised me something in return. I felt my mouth go dry. What did he promise you? Lucas's eyes gleamed. He promised me the trust. Ethan looked like he had been punched. That trust is mine. Lucas spread his hands like he didn't care. It was going to be mine until you showed up with your perfect wife and your perfect wedding and you ruined the plan. Ethan whispered, so, you're doing all this to steal from me? Lucas leaned forward. I'm doing this because you got to be the golden son while I got hidden. I'm doing this because you got love, a future, and a name while I got secrets and silence. And I'm doing this because our father taught me one lesson very well. He smiled without warmth. Take what you want before someone takes it from you. I could see Ethan shaking. But I could also see something else, a new kind of anger. A clean anger that comes when a person finally stops making excuses. Ethan said, you're not getting anything. You're not hurting Mariah. Lucas sighed, almost bored. Then you force my hand. He turned to the wedding planner. Give me the box. She hesitated, looking at me like she wanted help. I stepped forward. No, give it to me. Lucas's eyes snapped to mine. Careful, Grandma. You already tried to stand up to my father once. This ends badly for people like you. I lifted my chin. People like me? You mean people who don't bow? Lucas's smile twitched. You're brave. I'll give you that. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a second phone. He tapped the screen and held it up so Ethan could see. On the screen was a live video. It showed Mariah sitting at the head table. A camera was watching her from somewhere in the room. Mariah was wiping her eyes gently, trying to keep her makeup neat. She looked like she was holding herself together with string. Lucas said softly, if you don't give me the box, I press one button and the audio plays. Ethan frowned. Audio of what? Lucas's voice became sharp. Audio of your father's speech edited and mixed with fake lines. Lines that make it sound like Mariah admitted she married you for money. Lines that make it sound like she planned to trap you. My hands turned cold again. That would destroy her reputation, Lucas nodded. Exactly. And once the room turns against her, the annulment looks reasonable. Everyone will say, oh, poor Ethan. He was tricked. Ethan's face twisted with pain. You're cruel. Lucas gave a small shrug. I learned from the best. Then he pointed at me, the way a teacher points at a student. And you, he said, you still haven't answered the real question. Do you remember my father's old name? My heart pounded because I did remember. I had been trying not to say it, but I could see now why it mattered. If I said it, I could expose him. If I said it, I might protect my daughter. But he also threatened Mariah. Lucas stepped closer and lowered his voice. Say it and we go to war. Stay quiet, and Mariah keeps her smile. I looked at Ethan and Ethan looked at me and I could see him silently begging me to be careful. But I also knew something else. Bullies grow stronger when good people stay silent. That I took a slow breath and said, Ethan, go to Mariah. Tell her to stay with the bridesmaids and do not go anywhere alone. Tell her to keep her phone in her hand. Ethan hesitated. What are you going to do? I stared at Lucas. I'm going to end this. Ethan started to protest, but I gave him a look that said, trust me. He ran back toward the ballroom. Now that it was just me, Lucas, the wedding planner, and the hum of the kitchen lights. Lucas smiled. You're alone now. I kept my voice calm. No, I'm not, because you forgot something. Lucas raised an eyebrow. What? I pointed to the wedding planner. She heard everything you said. The planner swallowed hard. I said gently, if you help me, I can help you. Lucas laughed. Help her how? I own her fear. I shook my head slowly. No, you don't. Fear is loud, but truth is louder when it finally speaks. Lucas rolled his eyes. Enough speeches. He reached for the black box in the planner's bag. In one quick move, I grabbed the bag first. The planner gasped. Lucas's hand snapped out and grabbed my wrist hard enough to make me wince, but not enough to hurt badly. Still, the message was clear, give it back. My heart pounded, but I did not let go. Lucas leaned close, his voice a low hiss. You think you can fight me? You're just an old woman. I stared back. I'm the woman who raised a daughter alone. I fought harder battles than you. Then I did something I had not planned to do. I shouted loud, sharp, and clear, security. The word echoed off the hallway walls. Lucas's head jerked, surprised. And before he could stop me, I yelled again, someone is trying to blackmail the bride and groom. Call the police. The wedding planner cried out, please help. Footsteps thundered from the kitchen. A chef burst through the door, wide-eyed. 2 servers followed. Lucas's confident smile finally cracked. He snatched at the bag again, trying to pull it away, but I held on with both hands. The strap dug into my fingers, but I refused to let go. Then Lucas did something that made my stomach drop. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small key card, and waved it. You want to fight, he said. Fine. He tapped the card against a side door marked staff only, and the lock clicked. Then he smiled cold and sure. Let's show everyone what happens when Grandma talks too much. He yanked the door open, and inside I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. Mariah's maid of honor was on the floor, her hands tied with cloth, her eyes wide with fear, and beside her was Mariah's purse open with her phone missing. And Lucas said quietly, like he was proud, your daughter is next. Then he stepped back into the doorway, blocking the exit. And I realized the trap was already set, and the wedding was about to become a nightmare. My heart slammed so hard I thought everyone could hear it, even through the kitchen noise. Mariah's maid of honor, Tessa, was on the floor in the small staff room, her wrists wrapped with cloth, her mouth not covered, but trembling, her eyes wide with fear. She was breathing fast like she had been crying and trying not to scream. On a chair beside her was Mariah's purse, tipped over with everything half spilled out, and Lucas stood in the doorway like he was proud of what he had done. "Your daughter is next," he said, calm and cold. I stepped forward without thinking, but then I stopped because I knew that was what he wanted, for me to rush in and make a mistake. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Let her go, Lucas." Lucas tilted his head. "Or what?" I looked past him toward the kitchen entrance where the chef and 2 servers had gathered, frozen in shock. I held my chin high and said loudly, "Please, someone call security and call the police right now." One server pulled out his phone with shaky fingers. Lucas's eyes flashed with anger, but he still tried to keep his smile. "If you call anyone," he warned, "I press play. The whole room hears the confession from Mariah. The wedding is ruined and it will be your fault." I said, "No, it will be your fault because you are doing it." Lucas's smile tightened. "Grandma, you talk like a hero in a movie. This is real life. In real life, powerful people win." I took a slow step closer, not to fight, but to show him I was not afraid. Powerful people win when everyone is too scared to speak. Tessa made a small sound like she was trying to say something through panic. I crouched a little so she could see me and I kept my voice gentle like I was talking to a child. "Tessa, you're okay. We're here. Can you tell me where Mariah is?" Tessa swallowed and whispered, "She went to the restroom and then someone texted her. It said you needed her in the hallway. I told her not to go alone, but she said it was you." My stomach dropped because I had not texted Mariah anything. Lucas chuckled softly like he enjoyed watching my fear grow. "Smart girl, your daughter. She listens to her mother. That's why I had to borrow her trust." I stood up fast. "Where is she, Lucas?" Lucas lifted his eyebrows. "Guess." I looked at the chef. "Lock the ballroom doors. Tell the DJ to pause the music and find the groom, Ethan, right now." The chef nodded, still shocked, but he moved quickly. One of the servers ran down the hallway. Lucas's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked less like a proud prince and more like a boy who might lose control. He pointed at me. "You are making this worse." I said, "No, I am making it stop." Then I did something that made Lucas blink. I turned to the wedding planner who was standing behind me with tears in her eyes and I said, "Give me the box." The planner hesitated. He said. I interrupted softly. "I know what he said. Hand it to me." She pulled the small black box from her bag and placed it in my hand. It was light, almost too light for the amount of trouble it was causing. Lucas laughed once. "You think you can hold it like it's a shield?" I looked right at him. "I think you're scared of what is inside it, and I think you're scared of what people will learn if the truth gets out." Lucas's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what truth is." I lifted the box slightly. "Then explain it right now in simple words. Explain why you tied up Tessa. Explain why you stole Mariah's phone. Explain why you're holding an annulment request at a wedding." Lucas paused just for a second. That pause told me something important. He did not want to explain because once he explained, it would sound exactly like what it was, a plan, a trap, a crime. Then from down the hallway, I heard running footsteps. Ethan appeared breathless, his tie crooked, his face wild with fear. "Where is Mariah?" he demanded. Lucas's smile returned, but it looked forced now. "Hello, brother." Ethan ignored him and grabbed my shoulders gently. "Where is she?" I said quickly. "Lucas sent a fake text to Mariah. He made it look like it was from me. She went to the restroom and then into the hallway." Ethan's face turned pale. "Mariah doesn't even leave her phone unlocked. How did he text her?" My throat went tight. "Because he has her phone." Ethan stared at Lucas. "Where is my wife?" Lucas shrugged. "She's fine for now." Ethan took a step forward and I could tell he wanted to punch Lucas, but he held back. Ethan was not a violent man, he was just a man pushed to his limit. He said loud and clear, "You're not touching her. Do you hear me? Lucas looked bored. You can't protect her from everything. Ethan's voice shook, but it held strong. I can protect her from you. Then Ethan turned to the chef and the servers. Did someone call security? The chef said, yes, and someone called the police, too. Lucas's eyes flashed again. You called the police? I said, yes. Lucas stared at me like he wanted to burn a hole through my forehead. Then you just signed your daughter's death of reputation. Ethan snapped, stop talking about her like she's an object. Lucas laughed softly. She is to you, she's love. To father, she's a threat. To me, she's a door. When she's removed, the trust opens. I froze because Lucas just said it plainly and now there was no hiding it. Ethan's mouth fell open. The trust is real. Lucas's smile turned sharp. Of course it's real. Grandfather left it for you, but only if you married someone outside father's control. Your marriage is the key, Ethan. That's why father tried to stop it, and that's why we're going to break it. Ethan whispered, Dad knows you're here? Lucas nodded. Dad sent me. The words fell heavy in the hallway. Ethan looked like he was trying to understand his whole life again. That I felt anger rise like a flame, but I stayed focused. Where is Mariah, Lucas? Lucas leaned closer to Ethan and said, tell Grandma to say father's old name, the one she used to know, and I'll tell you where she is. Ethan snapped his head toward me. Old name? What does that mean? I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but the truth was, I knew this moment was coming. Years ago at that hotel, the man who later became Mr. Whitmore did not just threaten me. He did something worse. He tried to destroy my life because I refused to be quiet. He tried to use lies and connections to make me look like a criminal. And I had learned his real name then because I needed it to protect myself. That I looked at Ethan and said, your father is not just Whitmore. That's a name he chose years ago. He used another name. Ethan's eyes widened. What name? Lucas smiled like he was daring me, like he was waiting for me to step into the trap. And I realized something else, too. Lucas did not only want the old name said. He wanted it said in front of people. He wanted me to cause a huge scene so he could twist it into chaos. But I could still use the truth and use it wisely. I lowered my voice and said to Ethan, we will deal with names later. Right now, we find Mariah. Ethan nodded hard. Yes, yes. Then the hallway door at the far end opened and 2 security guards hurried in along with the wedding planner's assistant. One guard looked at Tessa on the floor and said, what happened? Tessa cried, they tricked us. They took Mariah's phone and they sent her a fake message. The guard's face changed fast. Where is the bride? Lucas lifted his hands like he was innocent. This is ridiculous. I'm family. Ethan pointed at Lucas. He is not family to her. Find my wife now. The guard spoke into his radio, we need eyes on the bride. Check restrooms, hallway, storage rooms, every exit. My chest felt tight, but I forced myself to breathe. Then from down the corridor, I heard a soft sound, a muffled knock. It was faint, like someone tapping from inside a closed door. We all went silent. Lucas's smile slipped again just a little. I followed the sound. It came from a door with a small sign that read linens. The guard tried the handle. It was locked. Ethan's voice broke, Mariah. Another knock came, quicker this time. My heart jumped. She's in there, I whispered. Lucas took one step back like he wasn't happy the game was changing. The guard said, key now. The chef ran forward and said, I have one for staff rooms. He fumbled through his keys, shaking so hard the metal jingled loudly. Lucas suddenly turned and bolted down the hallway. Ethan shouted, stop him. One guard chased Lucas. The other guard stayed at the linen door. The chef finally found the right key. He shoved it into the lock. Click. The door opened and there was Mariah. She was sitting on the floor, her dress bunched around her, her eyes wet, but she was not hurt. Her hands were free, but she looked exhausted, like she had been crying and praying and trying to stay brave. She looked up at us and whispered, "Mom." I ran to her and wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight. "I'm here, baby. You're safe." Mariah clung to me, shaking. "Someone took my phone. They told me you needed me." Then the door shut and I couldn't get out. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Mariah looked at Ethan, then at me, and she whispered, "Why is your family doing this?" Ethan didn't have an answer yet, not a full one. And that silence filled the little linen room like fog. Then the guard's radio crackled. "We found Lucas," the guard said, breathing hard. "He's near the back exit, but he's not alone. Mr. Whitmore is here, and he's demanding we let them leave." My stomach turned because Mr. Whitmore had stepped into the open, and that meant the biggest fight was about to happen, not with whispers in hallways, but in front of everyone. I held Mariah's face gently and said, "Stay with Ethan. Do not move until we say so." Mariah nodded, still shaking. I stood up slowly. My hands were steady now, because my fear had changed into something else, courage. I walked out of the linen room straight toward the hallway, and I heard the ballroom doors opening in the distance because people were starting to notice something was wrong. And then I heard Mr. Whitmore's voice, loud and angry, no longer pretending to be charming. "This is my son's wedding," he snapped. "You will not accuse my family of anything." The guard said, "Sir, the police are on their way." Mr. Whitmore barked, "Then I'll make one call and you'll all lose your jobs." I stepped into the hall and Mr. Whitmore's eyes locked on mine. His face tightened and for 1 second I saw fear again deep in his eyes. He knew I had Mariah back. He knew the plan was falling apart. He leaned closer to me and hissed, "Say my old name and I will destroy your daughter." "I swear it." I looked at him calmly and said, "You already tried." Then the ballroom doors opened wider and guests began to spill into the hallway, curious, whispering, filming on phones. Mr. Whitmore's smile tried to return, but it was shaking now. And as the crowd gathered, I realized something. This was the moment he had threatened me about. This was the moment where my next words could save my daughter or put an even bigger target on her back. The guard's radio crackled again. "Police are at the entrance," the guard said. "They're walking in now." Mr. Whitmore's eyes widened. Lucas, standing beside him, whispered something into his ear. And Mr. Whitmore suddenly shouted loud enough for the guests to hear, "Fine, you want the truth? Ask her who she really is. Ask her why she recognizes me." Every head turned toward me. Every camera lifted. Mariah's wedding guests stared like the room had stopped breathing. And I understood the danger clearly. Mr. Whitmore was trying to flip the story. He was trying to make me look like the secret. He was trying to make me look like the villain. I took one step forward, stared straight at him, and opened my mouth to speak, knowing the next sentence could change everything. The hallway felt like it had turned into a courtroom. 400 guests crowded near the doors holding phones, whispering, pointing. The music was off now. The laughter was gone. All that remained was the sound of people breathing, the soft buzz of lights, and the heavy footsteps of police officers walking in from the entrance. Mr. Whitmore stood with Lucas beside him, both of them trying to look confident, but I could see the truth in their faces. Mr. Whitmore's jaw was tight. His eyes were too wide. And Lucas kept shifting his weight like he was ready to run again, and my daughter Mariah was standing behind me now with Ethan, her dress slightly wrinkled from the linen room, her eyes red, but her chin lifted. I could feel her hand holding the back of my sleeve like she was a little girl again, holding on to her mother for safety. Mr. Whitmore shouted again, "Ask her who she really is. Ask her why she recognizes me." The crowd murmured louder. One woman whispered, "What does he mean?" A man whispered, "Is there a scandal?" Mariah's breathing got faster. Ethan put his arm around her, but he looked like he might break. Then a police officer stepped forward. He was calm, steady, and professional. "Everyone, please step back," the officer said. "We received a report of blackmail, unlawful restraint, and possible fraud." "Who made the call?" The server who had called raised his hand and pointed toward the staff hallway. "I did, officer. I saw a woman tied up and a man threatening people." The officer looked at Tessa, who had now been helped to stand. Her wrists were red from the cloth and her eyes were still wide. "Ma'am," the officer asked gently, "were you restrained?" Tessa nodded fast. "Yes, they grabbed me, tied me, and took the bride's phone." The officer's face hardened. He turned toward Lucas. "Sir, what is your name?" Lucas lifted his chin. "Lucas Whitmore." Ethan spoke sharply. "He's not a Whitmore. He said he's my brother, but I never knew him. And he locked my wife in a linen room." The crowd gasped. Mariah whispered, "He locked me in there," and her voice trembled, but she said it clearly so no one could twist it. Mr. Whitmore lifted his hands like he was offended. "This is ridiculous. My son is emotional. Weddings make people dramatic." The officer did not smile. "Sir, do you have an explanation for the bride being locked in a room?" Mr. Whitmore opened his mouth, then shut it. Lucas tried to speak. "It was a misunderstanding. I stepped forward before they could spin it. I held up the small black box in my hand. 'This is part of the plan,' I said. They forced the wedding planner to take this. They said it holds a recording they can edit to ruin my daughter. They also brought an annulment request to file tomorrow morning." The wedding planner, shaking, nodded and said, "It's true. He threatened me. He said he would destroy my business." Mr. Whitmore snapped, "You're lying." The officer held up a hand. "We will sort truth from lies. For now, no one is leaving." Then Mr. Whitmore did something I did not expect. He pointed at me, his voice loud and sharp, and he said, "She is the reason this is happening. She knows who I am. She knows what I used to be called." His eyes locked on mine like a dare. He wanted me to panic. He wanted me to look guilty. He wanted the crowd to focus on me instead of on what he and Lucas had done. That I took a slow breath. I remembered the night years ago Kai Tuan Goi Ben Juong Bi Mariah and promised the world would not break her. And I realized this was that promise again. Not with fists, not with yelling, with courage and truth. I looked at the officer first, not the crowd, and I said, "Officer, I will explain clearly. I will not hide anything." Then I turned to the guests. I kept my voice calm, simple, and strong so everyone could follow. "Many years ago, I began, before my daughter was born, I worked at a hotel. I cleaned rooms. I was young and trying to survive. A man stayed at that hotel who treated workers badly. He tried to get me fired with lies because I refused to let him bully me." Mr. Whitmore's face tightened. I continued, "That man used a different name at the time. He used it because he did not want anyone to trace him, but I learned it when I had to defend myself." The hallway was so quiet you could hear someone's phone camera focusing. Ethan whispered, "Mom." Mariah squeezed my sleeve harder. The officer said, "Ma'am, can you state the name?" I looked directly at Mr. Whitmore and said clearly, "His name back then was Gerald Crane." Mr. Whitmore flinched like I had struck him. The crowd murmured loud now. I raised my voice just enough to keep control. "He Sao Du De Doi Ten Ton Whitmore. He told people it was for business, but it was also to hide what he did and who he hurt." Mr. Whitmore's face went pale again, just like No De Tung Kai Tua Hoi on Ta Ko Beat Tua La Ai Kong. Lucas snapped, "That's not a crime." I looked at Lucas. "The name itself is not the crime. What you did tonight is." The officer turned to Mr. Whitmore. "Sir, is it true you previously used the name Gerald Crane?" Mr. Whitmore tried to laugh, but his laugh sounded weak. "People change names. It's not illegal." The officer nodded Motilon. "Not illegal by itself, but it can be relevant if fraud is involved." Then I said the part that mattered most, the part that connected everything. Mr. Whitmore and Lucas did not insult me today only because they wanted to be mean. They did it because my daughter married Ethan and that marriage affects a trust fund. The crowd went still again. Ethan's eyes widened. So it's true. I nodded. Yes, Ethan, it's true. Lucas scoffed. You don't know anything about that. I turned toward him. You already admitted it in the staff hallway. You said the trust opens when Mariah is removed. And you said your father sent you. Lucas's smile vanished. The officer said, we have a witness to that conversation. The chef raised his hand. I heard it. The server heard it, too. The wedding planner whispered, I heard it. Tessa said, I heard it. He said it out loud. Lucas's face tightened. Mr. Whitmore's eyes darted toward the exit. Then Ethan stepped forward, voice shaking but firm. My grandfather used to say he didn't trust my father, Ethan said. He said Dad cared more about money than people. I always thought it was just old family drama, but now I see why grandfather made a trust. Ethan turned to the officer. My dad controls the family company. He controls everything. He threatened to ruin my career if I married Mariah. He tried to stop our wedding. And now I see why. Mariah's voice was small but clear. He humiliated my mom to break us. He tried to trap me. He tried to make me look like a bad person. I reached back and held Mariah's hand. Yes, baby. That is exactly what he tried to do. Mr. Whitmore suddenly barked, enough. This is family business. You don't understand. The officer cut him off. Sir, it became police business when someone was restrained and threatened. You will remain here. Mr. Whitmore's face twisted in anger. I have lawyers. The officer said calmly, you're welcome to call them. Right now, I need everyone to stay still. Then something important happened. One of the officers asked to see the black box. Another officer took the phone that was used to send Mariah the fake message. The staff helped point out the linen room lock. The wedding planner explained the threats. Tessa showed the marks on her wrists. The servers told what they saw. In simple, clear steps, the truth became a straight line that no one could bend. Lucas started to panic. He said, this is crazy. I didn't tie anyone. I didn't lock anyone. The officer asked, then why did you have access to the staff room? Why did you run when security arrived? Lucas opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Whitmore glared at Lucas like he was angry Lucas had failed. And that was Kai Lucas Mac Sai Lam Lon not Kwa Min. He pointed at Mr. Whitmore and shouted, he told me to do it. He promised me the trust if I helped break the marriage. He said the wife had to go. The hallway exploded with gasps. Mariah covered her mouth. Ethan looked like his heart was cracking. Mr. Whitmore snapped, you idiot. The officer stepped forward. So, you are admitting to a plan to interfere with this marriage for financial gain. Lucas realized what he had done and tried to take it back. No, I didn't mean. But it was too late. That one sentence showed motive, showed connection, showed the reason for the betrayal. It was not a mystery anymore. It was greed. It was control. It was fear of losing power. The officers moved quickly. One officer gently guided Mariah and Ethan away from the crowd to keep them safe and calm. Two officers stepped toward Mr. Whitmore and Lucas. Sir, the officer said to Mr. Whitmore, you are being detained for questioning related to blackmail and unlawful restraint. Mr. Whitmore's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I almost wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was the same thing I had asked him first. Do you know who I am? I had asked. And now he was asking it back, as if power was the only language he understood. The officer said, right now, I know you are someone we need to investigate. Lucas tried to step back, but another officer stopped him. Lucas Whitmore, the officer said, you are also being detained. Lucas's eyes darted around like a trapped animal. Then his shoulders dropped. He suddenly looked young and tired. For a moment, I felt a small pang of sadness for him, not because he was innocent, because he wasn't, but because he was proof of what happens when a child is raised with selfish values. He had learned to take, not to love. And now he was paying for it. The officers led them away down the hallway. Guests stepped aside like water parting. Phones kept recording, but no one laughed anymore. No one smiled, because everyone could see it clearly now. The groom's father had tried to ruin his own son's marriage for money. The next hour was messy, but it was the truth. Mariah sat in a private room with Ethan, the wedding planner, and me. She drank water. She cried. She kept asking the same question over and over, because that's what people do when their hearts are shaken. Mom, why would they do this? She whispered. I answered plainly each time so she wouldn't have to guess. They did it because your marriage threatened their control, I said. Mr. Whitmore wanted to keep Ethan dependent. He wanted Ethan to stay under him. The trust meant Ethan could be free, so they tried to break you before the marriage could settle. Mariah wiped her face. So it was never about my shoes or my family? It was partly about pride, I said gently, but mostly about fear. Fear that Ethan would choose love over control. Ethan's voice cracked. I should have protected you sooner. Mariah looked at him. You did protect me. You married me anyway. But next time, we won't keep any secrets from each other. Ethan nodded firmly. Never again. That was the first moment of healing, not perfect, but real. Later, the police returned and explained what would happen next. There would be reports, statements, and an investigation. They would review the evidence, speak to witnesses, check the trust documents, and look into Mr. Whitmore's former identity and any past fraud tied to it. They didn't promise quick answers, but they promised the truth would be handled properly. Mariah asked, will I get into any trouble? The officer replied kindly, no, you are the victim here. You did nothing wrong. Mariah's shoulders finally relaxed. Ethan asked, what about the trust fund? The officer said, that's a legal matter, but if fraud is involved, it will be thoroughly investigated. After the officers left, Ethan stared at his hands for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, you saved us. I shook my head. No, we saved ourselves. Mariah leaned against my shoulder. Mom, when you stood up, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I kissed the top of her head. You were never alone. The wedding didn't continue the way we had imagined. There was no big dance party, no perfect final song. But something more important happened. The truth came into the light, and sometimes, that is the real victory. A few weeks later, life looked different. Ethan moved out of his father's house completely. He found work on his own. It was difficult at first, but he was proud to build his own path. Mariah and Ethan stayed together and went to counseling so they could learn to be a team without fear hanging over them. The trust issue went into legal hands, and step by step, the truth came out. Ethan's grandfather had indeed left a trust, one designed to protect him from being controlled. And because Ethan and Mariah were legally married, the trust couldn't simply be taken through threats and manipulation. Lucas also faced consequences. He had to answer for what he did. He could no longer hide behind his family. The law treated him for what he was that night, someone who helped cause harm, and Mr. Whitmore lost the one thing he valued most, control. The moment the truth was spoken, the moment his past identity was revealed, his powerful image shattered. People saw him for what he really was, a man who used money as a weapon and fear as a leash. One afternoon, Mariah sat with me on my small porch, the same porch where I used to watch her play with chalk as a child. She said quietly, Mom, I used to think being quiet was safer. I nodded. Me too, for a long time. She looked at me. But when you spoke up, everything changed. I held her hand. Yes. Silence can feel safe, but it can also trap us. Speaking up is scary, but it can set us free. Mariah rested her head on my shoulder. I want to be brave like you. I smiled softly. You already are. You made it through this, and you didn't let them turn you into what they wanted. That's courage. Ethan joined us on the porch with 2 cups of tea. He sat down and said, I used to think family meant obedience. Now I know family is about protection. I nodded. Exactly. And that was the lesson we carried forward, the one that held us steady: trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't stay silent just to keep the peace, because peace built on fear isn't peace at all. And most importantly, love should never come with threats. Love must come with safety. Months later, Mariah and Ethan held a small new celebration. Not a grand wedding, just a gathering of people who truly loved them. They called it their new beginning. Mariah wore a simple white dress. Ethan wore a plain suit. There were no fancy speeches, no cruel jokes, just genuine smiles. At the end of the night, Mariah held my hands and said, Mom, if you hadn't stood up that day, I don't know what would have happened. I looked at her, the girl I had raised alone, the woman she had become, and said, I stood up because you are my daughter. And because bullies don't stop when we whisper, they stop when we speak. Mariah smiled, and this time it was real, completely free. And in that quiet, perfect moment, I knew the truth: the best revenge isn't hurting them back. The best revenge is refusing to be broken, and we were not broken. We were finally, truly free.